Every time. I love that. My name is Evan Baer. We are so delighted to have you guys. Ford Smith and a few other people on our team, I think about 2.5 weeks ago, said we have a few friends coming into town around South by Southwest that are interested in the American health revolution. We invited about 10, and 277 are here today. Round of applause. This is amazing. This is amazing. And it just is a testament to the community that's come together, particularly in this moment in Austin. I'm going to tell you briefly about Arena Hall, let Ford tell you about what we're working on, and then we'll get right into the content. You guys are at this place we call Arena Hall. It's named after the Teddy Roosevelt speech about the man or woman in the arena. The thing I love about that speech is he calls us all to be in the arena, to dare greatly, but we are not promised victory. The contrast is you're either in the arena, daring greatly, and you might be losing a lot. I lose a lot. But it's better than being on the sidelines, the timid soul. And what's sad about the timid soul? The timid soul knows neither victory nor defeat. So we're a community and we're a place, and we have a lot of companies that we're building, and we're investing in companies, and we'd love to focus this energy and ask the question, how could Austin be in the 2020s what Paris was in the 1920s? We think this is happening in a bunch of key sectors, and health and wellness is a really important one of those. And this event is a testimony to that. Many of you guys are in Austin, and we think something very special is happening in Austin right now, catalyzing the future of healthcare in America and around the world. We're so delighted to be a part of hosting this event with Ford and Ultranative. He's going to tell you what we're up to and what Ultranative is up to. Ford Smith.
Thank you. Yeah, so I was at the inauguration, when was that, in January? And the energy that was around this one event, specifically this Maha Ball that was put together by Dell, it was one of the most electric events I've been to in my entire life. I struggled, I grew up early Adderall user, antidepressants by 15, struggled with depression, addiction, been to rehab, 5 felonies, like the whole 9 yards. And I found my purpose and treatment of my own anxiety and depression through solving my own problems, right? I had to go in, this is 2016, there wasn't a lot of this content happening, and I had to go and figure out how to get off the meds and how to treat it with functional medicine, ketogenic diet, psychedelics, everything. And so in that process, I found a lot of purpose. And what I do in my business is Ultranative is essentially a venture studio that builds and invests in companies that are focused on people and planet. And what's happening in the Maha movement right now, I think it's a bipartisan issue. And it's unfortunate that right now that people don't see it that way. And I think that our goal is to really build this is like the first of what we want to do of many events like this, and build this community and really be able to help convey to everybody that this affects every single person's life. And we want to activate, think of this as the American health revolution. This is the militia. We brought the generals, we brought some leaders in the space. We're all leaders in our own right, and I just want to help use this community to catalyze new ideas, new investment opportunities. If you need help, if you need raising capital, if you've got a business you need advisors or team members for, whatever, we want this to be a community to incubate these concepts, because this is a really big issue, and it's going to require everybody's help. So I'm really grateful that you all could be here, and thanks to all of our friends too. A lot of us were other people were how'd you get these people on your panels? I'm they're our friends. It was fucking crazy. So Dell's a new friend, but all these guys are good friends of ours, and it's fun to watch them on TV and do their thing, and just wanted to bring them to y'all and kind of inspire and kick this off.
Amazing. Thank you, Ford. Well, the good news for your longevity, but the bad news for today is that we followed Mark Hyman's advice and basically created a real-time outdoor cold plunge for this event. And given that, we do want you to think of it this way. So the afternoon, we're going to have some panels. We're going to have what we call some spotlights featuring founders that are building new kinds of companies. But if you're seated down here, if you're out here, you don't have to stay stuck in your seat the whole time. Go inside, get coffee, warm up. After these panels end, the panel is going to go inside. So if you want to follow up with something that they said, stand up, walk right in. We hope you're moving all day. It's not rude to get up and move around and get some coffee. So this afternoon, we got some panels back to back. Restrooms are in the inside. We've got coffee. We've got Wi-Fi. Anything you need, let us know. With that, I think we're going to get underway. All right. So this panel is an incredible set of people, some new friends, some old friends. And first, just to kick us off, I want to take us to a specific moment and have Calley kick us off. Calley's in the hot seat. All right. So July 13th was a very important date. On that date, I think you were watching President Trump on television. Take us to that moment. What did you see and what did you do?
So backing up a little bit, my sister was in residency. She read a book by Dr. Mark Hyman. She said that she learned more about why people are getting sick from that one book than researching at the NIH, than going to Stanford Med School, than surgical residency. She left the system after being radicalized by Mark's work. You've done this to a lot of people. Gave me his book, and it helped me put the pieces together. So this became a passion of my life. What I define as changing health incentives from going to what right now is a disease management structure where every single system of the healthcare industry, just as a demonstrable statement of economic fact, profits when we're sick, when we're depressed on interventions. That's 95% of medical spending. And we can have a system, it's not the free market that creates that system, it's corruption. We can have a system where people get paid, where people are incentivized in the healthcare system to promote longevity, to promote disease reversal and prevention. And what I saw leading up to that day is you had Bobby Kennedy with Dell's genius behind him, marshaling this incredible political coalition. There was something wrong actually, that both major party candidates weren't talking about this issue of chronic disease, children's health, but Bobby Kennedy, these events were electric, and he was getting up to 19% of the vote. And there was a disconnect there where President Trump and Joe Biden weren't talking about this issue much, kind of Mark Hyman's messages, Del Bigtree's messages. But you turn on Joe Rogan and you turn on the podcasts, many of the podcast hosts here, they're talking about metabolic health. They're talking about, healthcare corruption, why kids are getting sick. So my brain as a former political consultant was trained, how can we get this message, Bobby's message, as wide as possible? And there was this moment when President Trump was shot that rang into my head, which maybe this is the moment for unity. When dramatic things happen, there is an opportunity for good or bad. There was poignance with the assassination and Bobby's history with that. So I, as a supporter of Bobby's, just felt a spiritual urge to call him, put that idea in his head. He was thinking about unity too, and I, just from a small vantage point Del and I had, just watching this happen, there was something spiritual and magical that happened in the conversations with President Trump and Bobby Kennedy that started right when President Trump was in the hospital. They talked for hours about children's health, why kids are getting sick, why autism rates are going up, why our system is incentivized for sick patients. And I think their bond that developed there and what happened during the campaign, where this issue was brought front and center and galvanized so many people and really put voice on so many people here, what an incredible group of leaders, put voice behind the work so many people have been doing for decades, something really special happened. So I think there were a lot of mixed... Yeah.
And just to follow up to that, Mark was saying just the other day that you've been working on this for 20 years. We'll hear more of Mark's story later, 30 or even longer. But all of a sudden, all these people who used to not care about this at all, or who even disagreed with it, something really crazy happened. I mean, can you speak a little bit more to specifically what happened with Donald Trump himself and people around him? Were they awoken in a new way, or what happened to explain this big change of course?
My theory is that, I was not a Trump supporter back in the day, and I've actually evolved on it up until this election, where the foundation of his candidacy and his existence in American life is correct, which is this, in my interpretation, the MAGA kind of mindset is that it's not a left-right debate anymore. It's that there's corruption, that there's crony capitalism, that there has been a takeover of our core institutions, from healthcare to education to the military-industrial complex, where our core institutions are not providing the service that we expect them to provide due to corporate capture. And I think what we saw is that MAHA, this idea of kids getting sick and the system profiting, the fact that we spend 4 times more than Europe per capita on healthcare, but live 7 years less than the Italians, when we're not lazier than Italians, we're just really have bad incentives, I believe. That really rang true, I think, as to Donald Trump as a proof point of the underlying MAGA message, and I think really fit well as that proof point, and I think gave the language to President Trump that wasn't weird. This fits so ideologically well for him, I think. And the last thing I'll say, Don wants to jump in, is that there was a political moment for this, and the fact that people voted on this issue and President Trump was able to galvanize, that gives the power and the opportunity that we have today to really get something done.
Hey, Del, go where you want to go, but also you've been working on this for decades. Maybe set the context a little bit of slow growth over time, and then what was the tipping point from your perspective?
I mean, there's been... I am on. Checked. Okay. That's a hard question to answer. I think for some people, like for me, I have been in natural health because my parents were. I am the product of a crunchy granola family of hippies that marched in the 60s for freedom. We were macrobiotic when I was 3. I was taught to meditate when I was 4 years old. I am unvaccinated. So my entire life, I have been trying to mainstream the way that I was raised. And I think we're getting really close now. So everywhere, whether I was hired onto the doctor's television show, thank you. So when I got on the doctor's television show as a producer, my mom would call and say, "What are you doing working on a medical talk show? You've never been to a doctor in your entire life." And I said, "I don't know, Mom. I think it's a miracle because no one knows why I'm here. I'm sort of a Trojan horse, and every story I'm doing is about bringing alternative health or functional medicine into science. The Cleveland Clinic is adding chiropractic, or there's doctors that are using acupuncture instead of, anesthesia." And I was the highest rated producer on the show. I won an Emmy Award on the show. So that idea, what I was talking about, the nation wanted. I just didn't tell anybody what I was doing. My executive producers didn't understand what was happening. They just said, every time I bring a story, they're like, "I don't understand it, Del. Is it going to rate? Is it going to get good ratings?" I was like, "Doesn't all of my stories rate?" So from that perspective, I've just been pushing it. But then I ran into really the issue around vaccines when there was a whistleblower inside the CDC that came forward, Dr. William Thompson, and I pitched that story, and that was just a bridge too far. The executive said, "You are not going to tell a story about a whistleblower inside of the CDC saying that vaccines cause autism. It's not going to happen." And so that was where I departed from television. I had taken it as far as I could, and I said, this documentary is going to change the world, and I made Vaxxed. And I think in many ways that did ignite this movement of medical freedom, this conversation, and the real difference. And I would say, sort of bringing it all the way around to Donald Trump. At the same time I was making Vaxxed, Donald Trump was running for president. And all of the people that were being injured by vaccines had been sidelined. No one was getting any media. In fact, they were all ignoring the media. And I came from media, and I just said, we're doing this wrong. I come from an old school, which is there's no such thing as bad press. So once we were done with Vaxxed, I was sitting in a final screening with some producers and friends in LA, and they said, "Del, this documentary is amazing, but it's just going to get buried like all the rest. How are you going to get attention?" I said, "No, I've made a different choice. Every other documentary on vaccines has interviewed Dr. Andrew Wakefield, who's the big bad guy out of England that created the fraud, and they never put him in the documentary. He hits the editing room floor because they'll say he brings bad press." And I said, they are getting no press. Instead, Vaxxed is going to celebrate not only that he's in it, that he's the director of it, and I'm going to piss off the pharmaceutical industry so bad, I believe they're going to go against their best interests, and they will attack us in every major media form, and we will finally be on the map. And that negative press is going to tell the world this issue exists, and it worked. We got kicked out of Tribeca Film Festival. It became the biggest news story in media all around the world, and we're in sold-out audiences every day for an entire year, lines down the block, and we started changing this conversation. That's how I met Bobby. But I want to say, with Bobby and Trump, you got to remember, this goes back prior to just this year. Donald Trump was saying he believed vaccines caused autism from the moment he started running for president to begin with. And then when he got elected the first time, he called Bobby, brought him up to the Trump Towers and said, "I want you to run a vaccine safety commission." Bobby went down in front of CNN and all of the news cameras and said, "I've just been asked to run a vaccine safety commission for President Trump." So Trump was on this, but then the team around Trump, I'm sure heavily invested in pharmaceutical industry, 4 hours later got in front of the cameras and said, "Bobby's misguided. He misunderstood what was going on there. There's not going to be a vaccine safety commission." And that's really the inside baseball. That's where my relationship with Bobby began. I got a call from one of Bobby's people, and they said he's having a call with a bunch of people. He's really pissed off about how Trump has just handled this. And so it was like 20 of us on the call and everyone weighing in, and he was irate. I mean, he's at Kennedy. He was told to go in front of the cameras. He said, "I am here to run a vaccine safety commission," and now you're making him look like a fool, like he didn't understand what the meeting was about. He was hot about it. So we all sort of weighed in. All I know is the next day they said Bobby wants to get on a call. There was 3 of us. So somehow I was elevated. And so he and I have been talking about media ever since. But I want to point out that from that first meeting, Trump set up a meeting at the NIH in 2017, in the very beginning of when he was first running for president. He said to Bobby, I want you to take all the issues to the NIH that you have with the vaccine program. Bobby called me. We put together a panel of experts, and we went in with a presentation. And that was the first time. Bobby was sitting across from Francis Collins. I was sitting across from this guy I'd never heard of named Tony Fauci. And there was like about 10 other scientists across the table.
He's really short, right?
He's really
small.
short.
Yeah.
But we presented all of the failings in the vaccine program, all the lack of science that we believe was there. Our number one question, why can't we find a double-blind placebo trial of a single vaccine on the childhood schedule? In that meeting, they admitted they weren't doing that they're not doing safety trials. And from there, we walked away and said, the world is going to find this out. They're going to try and hide it. But we've been on mission from that point, and it got to the point where I said, Bobby, you should run for president. So that moment when the bullet misses Trump's ear, that really brought Bobby all the way back around into the fold and saying he knew where Trump was at. He cared about that moment. Calley, it's just, you cannot describe the amount of miracles that bring all of us into this room right now. Every one of us can look at our lives and say, how do we get here right now? Without Calley, this doesn't happen. Without so many people, Mark Hyman, all of these voices that were in Bobby's ear, in Trump's ear, all I can say is when Bobby put his hand on that Bible 2 weeks ago and I was standing in the Oval Office, all I can say is God is good and something spectacular is happening right now.
Amen. Woo! We were going to have a baptismal font, but it was a little too chilly. It might be a cold plunge baptismal after these sermons up here. But it is the case for so many people, it's a personal story. It sounds like for Del, it was your childhood. I know for Calley, it was his sister and his mother, her passing. Brigham, who is a regular guest on Rogan, built an amazing compounding pharmacies, building ways to well, doing awesome entrepreneurial things. Would you just kick us off, actually, I think, with your brother's story and a little bit of your path of what you learned in building this pharmacy and how it connects into what we're talking about today?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. Growing up here in Texas, I was a drug rep, and right out of college, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, went into thinking I was going to change the world, and it didn't take long to realize it was part of the dark side. Like, I saw the way that we would promote SSRIs and grow market share, and it was just something I couldn't do. And from there, I transitioned into med device, and I was out educating clinicians on the importance of not writing opioids and not prescribing these abusive, addictive compounds. And while I'm in the middle of trying to build a compounding pharmacy and educate all these clinicians throughout the state on why we shouldn't be using these medications, my brother got addicted to opioids and ended up passing away. And it was a life-changing moment and something that hit really hard. And it was so tough to go out and meet with clinicians and hear the bullshit, candidly, they're being told by Big Pharma, pushing these dangerous molecules into the marketplace. And it's all about quarterly earnings and quarterly profits. It has nothing to do with patient outcomes, patient health, and all the incentive systems. One of the things I've said time and time again, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcomes. If we build a market that is built around driving quarterly profits and not driving patient health, we shouldn't be shocked when we have amazing quarterly profits and earnings and piss poor patient health. We're one of the sickest countries in the world, like Calley was saying. 1.7 million people die a year in America of chronic disease. This is more than every war we've ever fought as a nation, and we're not talking about it until this election. Nobody's talked about it. And there are alternatives out there. And so many of those alternatives have been suppressed by alphabet organizations and their collusion and collaboration with Big Pharma and Big Medical. And those are one of the things that I've been trying to ring the bell on and expose.
I want to dig a little bit into the nature of Big Pharma itself. Obviously, the economics are such that the more they sell, the more you can consume, probably fuels their sickness. Doctors have the incentive to do that. But all three of you guys, maybe Del, I really enjoyed the documentary that you worked on. Give us some broccoli a little bit about how bad is pharma right now and how does it drive our continued sickness? Let's hear from both of you guys on that.
Well, first I would say pharmaceuticals not bad necessarily. if you're needing a surgery, you've been in a car accident, you're going to be really happy that the pharmaceutical industry has developed the incredible products they have. Our issue is that these giant industries, whether it's big pharma, big ag, big tech, their sort of control of our government, their infiltration of our government is the problem. Is that now they're driving policy, and now they not only have monopolies, they're controlling the entire market so that there is no competition, there is no other thought, and they've absolutely created what we're calling a healthcare system, but all it is a sick care system that's making us sicker and sicker by the day. And, you know, it owns every part of regulations of what you have to do to get into the market. And even worse, it owns your television set. And that's the part where I come in. I mean, at the point where you look at TV, 50 to 70% of all advertising is the pharmaceutical industry. That's more than oil and gas. That's more than any of the other baddies you're worrying about. It is controlling the television set. So every one of our friends that watches the news, and it doesn't matter which news program you're watching, that news anchor works for Pfizer. They work for Moderna. You should not be kidding yourself in any other way. If you do a story at CBS that goes against the pharmaceutical industry or points out something they do not want you to know, you are basically told, we're not going to do a story again like that. We got a lot of pushback. You understand me? I mean, you'll get one strike. If you do it again, they will sit you down and say, if you do another story like that without talking to us, you're fired. It's just that simple. It's not even an explanation. They won't say who called or what happened. You're not allowed to talk about it. Everyone knows that's the case. And so we're still in that situation. Unless, President Trump decides to get rid of direct-to-consumer marketing, which would be amazing, just to say that the pharmaceutical industry is not allowed to directly market, drugs and products on television. But think what that does to film and television. How many people here are in film and television? 70% of the funding in film and television disappears the moment that happens. So Hollywood doesn't want it. And is that free market? I mean, these are the types of things we're dealing with right now, is just, what choices do you want to make to try and right this ship? But that's at the heart of it.
Yeah. Hey, do you Brigham hop in? But I also would love for you guys to comment on the Hims Super Bowl commercial on the GLP. But where do you want to go? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and we had a dinner with some Texas senators 2 weeks ago, and one of the things I explained to them, between 2010 and 2019, 350 blockbuster drugs. 350 what they classify as blockbuster drugs. And I asked those senators, how many do you think Big Pharma innovated and came up with? The answer is not a fucking one. Not one drug was made by, it all came from the NIH, taxpayer dollars, taxpayer funded, including the GLP-1 boom, all of these various products. We're paying to innovate, paying to create, paying to bring a molecule to a marketplace. Then Big Pharma captures that molecule, brings it to the FDA, ramrods it into the marketplace, then structures backroom deals with the pharmacy benefit managers where they mark up the price even more. And back to the opioid crisis that was perpetuated by Big Pharma and its collusion with the head of the FDA at the time, who went to go work for Purdue Pharma, who pushed this opioid into the market. And then 30% of the revenue and profits generated from the opioid crisis was held by the pharmacy benefit managers. The very insurance companies that you're paying for coverage from profiteered off of death and destruction. And that is the problem with the system, is the corporate capture of the system. And Eisenhower warned us in his speech. Everyone talks about the famous Eisenhower speech about the military-industrial complex. But the second half of that speech, Eisenhower warned the people that if we allow our scientific institutions to be captured, this is what would happen. And I believe that's what we're seeing every day.
I can affirm from being at this dinner, Brigham made the point very clearly. He did drop the F-bomb as well with the senators, and they got the message. So I think, just tying this all together, I think we're on we need to be very clear where we're at. I think we're at the start of a 12-year journey. We need 12 years for this MAHA initiative to take hold. I think we should not be too picky about what gets done first. This is an extremely complex situation to unfold. We need to get wins, and we need those wins to continue and have popular support for 12 years, which literally the people in this room and the coalition in this room is one of the most important and powerful groups of people I think ever assembled, who we all need to keep that in mind. What I think we're really trying to unpack, taking off from what these two guys said so well, is that chronic disease is very profitable. Your children being sick, and at that appointment, when they have the high cholesterol, or they're a little bit sad, or they're a little bit overweight, That appointment with the doctor is one of the most important moments in America right now, because that child could learn that their biomarkers and what they're suffering from is reversible, and the result of underlying metabolic dysfunction that's going to be related to other comorbidities, that they can have more curiosity about the soil health and what they're eating and the sunlight and movement. They can use these symptoms to go on a path of curiosity to be better, happier, more productive humans. Or they could be prescribed a statin, prescribed an SSRI, prescribed Ozempic, which is now being recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics as the first line defense for an obese 12-year-old, and now it's going to 6. It literally says in the guidance from the American Academy of Pediatrics, do not wait for dietary or exercise interventions to fail. Prescribe Ozempic, which is a life-threatening drug, first. So there's a real battle, and taking any conspiratorial things out of this, it's just basic economics that my friends from HBS who work at pharma companies, who work at we'll talk about food in a second, but work at pharma, work at insurance, work at hospital companies, they will get fired if growth doesn't happen. There's probably people in the industry that see this here. There's a lot of people waking up. And in order for growth to happen, hospital beds need to be full. Drugs need to be prescribed longer. Insurance actually is incentivized for costs to go up because they take 15% just by law, only 15%, so they want the pie to grow. They want premiums to grow. So every single incentive is for people to get sicker. And that, based on the fact that healthcare is the largest industry in the country and the fastest growing industry in the country and very powerful, over 50% of states in the United States, the healthcare company is the largest employer in the state. They have mass political power, and that just goes to each department in the HHS that has been co-opted. The NIH, 90% of funding goes to pharma R&D. NIH researchers have made hundreds of millions of dollars during COVID, unreported, from pharmaceutical companies. It's a revolving door. All that money goes to universities where there's very little conflict of interest, and the university researchers are taking money from pharmaceutical companies. Then you get to the FDA, which is amazingly 75% funded by pharma itself. The actual regulatory agency that is to oversee pharma is funded by pharma. And then you get to CMS, which is the largest actual government department in the entire world. It's 2 times larger budget than the defense agency. It pays all of our healthcare, spending on Medicare, Medicaid, and really sets the standard for private insurance. They have outsourced their code creation to the American Medical Association, which is a pharmaceutical lobbying group. And they then outsource to specialty groups like the American Academy of Pediatrics and like the American Heart Association, which are fully owned subsidiaries of pharma. Until 2018, the American Diabetes Association said that as long as you take your diabetes meds, you can eat as much sugar as you want. No dietary interventions for diabetics. So that's the type of ecosystem we have to unwind. I think it can be unwind very quickly, but we need to just start chipping away. We need to keep talking on podcasts. We need to celebrate Bobby's wins.
I want to talk a little bit about, round of applause for Calley. Unbelievable. I want to explore a little bit of the political coalition. Something I'm kind of concerned about is, the reality of Orange Man bad, Trump derangement syndrome. Does it mean that Democrats who should be excited about this movement are unwilling to get on board or changing course because Trump is sort of co-opting this movement? Talk a little bit about the shape of the movement right now, and how does this become something that everyone is for? Pick up, Del.
I think you have to start. You got to recognize where you're at. I sat in the Senate while the vote was coming in for Bobby, and I was sitting next to my brother, who was raised the same way I was. We were always Democrats. We were liberals. That was the natural health movement. And to watch every one of them vote no against Robert Kennedy Jr. and his desire to make America healthy again, to get chemicals out of our food, to get safety testing done, just to put it all back on the table, all the chemical companies, all the fluoride in our water, all the pesticides and herbicides sprayed over all of our crops, all the hormones in our beef, to finally say it's all on the table. I'm choosing no sides. We're going to figure out what's making us sick, and watch every Democrat say, no, I'm against that. No, I'm voting no, I'm voting no, I'm voting no. I don't know what to do about that, except I said our party has just ceded the entire holistic health movement over to the Republican Party. This is over. So right now, I would say, as we build this MAHA movement into all of these influencers and incredible practitioners, we have half the country. There's plenty of work to do. Let's get them all healthy. And as we get healthier and we end up being those shining, radiant bodies that we know we have, our children are walking around without autism, maybe Democrats will start remembering themselves again and say, I guess I'm going to join that.
Hey, Cal, you want to pick up on that?
I mean, the goal for all of us should be that if the Democrats continue this intransigence, they get crushed so badly, which they will, that they're forced to come, and in future presidential elections, both sides are out mahaing each other, and you don't have a situation like you had shamefully this time, where you had Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren excoriating Bobby Kennedy for having the tenacity to sue pharma companies. I mean, it was just unbelievable. I don't know if you guys saw the recent joint speech to Congress, but you had a child stand up, a 13-year-old who just recovered from brain cancer, and President Trump, the first time in a speech by a president ever, he actually associated that cancer to preventable toxins in the environment. And that child stood up, and every single Democrat sat on their hands and could not clap for a child recovering from brain cancer due to stage 4 Trump derangement syndrome. And this is just going to be an absolute loser. What happened with MAHA, you look at the polling, the gender gap closed to 7 points for Republicans. It was supposed to be 22. Who would have thought 8 years ago that Trump would be 50-50 on young people and independents? These are Bobby Kennedy voters. These are MAHA moms. There was a truly historical, I think one of 3 great historical shifts in party alignment that happened in this campaign, because so many people are anxious about what's happening in children's health. So again, I want this to be a bipartisan issue, but I think we get there by getting wins, and it'll just be the reality that Democrats can no longer not clap for children recovering from brain cancer, can't not clap for getting toxins out of our food, can't not clap for studying why people are getting autism, can't not clap for getting clear corruption out of our scientific agencies. These are no-brainer bipartisan issues, but we are in a political environment. This has driven support to Republicans. Donald Trump and Bobby Kennedy seized the mantle, and I want them to win, and that's going to reframe all the debate.
But with all these practitioners in the room, I mean, maybe now is a good time to do this. Do we have any functional medicine research, practical applications that help stop or reverse stage 4 TDS?
Well, stage 4, it impacts the brain. And there's actually no known reversal of that. You know, Bobby Kennedy, I think, was stage 2 or 3. You can reverse from it. I was stage 2. But stage 4 I don't think there's a cure for that.
Yeah. So good. We got probably 5 or 10 more minutes on this. So on the one hand, the stats are pretty dour about how corrupt all the institutions are. The stats are promising about the groundswell movement. We think about this whole room of practitioners, influencers, et cetera. Maybe speak some wisdom or an invitation to us. How are we helping fuel the coalescence and the success of this movement? What are some things maybe you're concerned about, or ways that people could raise their hand to get involved in cementing the movement? Let's just go down the line. Del, if you want to start.
I think the number one thing we have to do is work together. Already, there's a lot of purity testing on Bobby, why the statement he made on measles. I mean, he's been infiltrated, all of these types of stories. Look, we're allowed to challenge what's happening here, but we got to give the guy a couple of days. He doesn't even have his team in place. He still needs Dr. Oz. He still needs Marty McCreary, Dave Weldon, Jay Bhattacharya, all just dynamic individuals ready to do the work. He still needs his team around him. But no matter what, you have to recognize this is an oil tanker that's been heading in one direction for a very long time. It does not turn around overnight. And I want to point out that Robert Kennedy Jr., the reason I have said I will support you, I'll be a general for you for the rest of your life, is he is one of the most strategic, brilliant legal minds. He's the most effective lawyer that has ever been in the environmental movement. The Democrats should be bowing down to him. He has done more for cleaning up their water, their air, their food than anybody in history. And now he is finally inside of the government. He's been suing his entire life. He knows what he's doing there. He knows how to move this. But we've got to recognize that if you just went in and said, get rid of the vaccine program and take the chemical, and just, if he acted like that, all he's going to create is a civil war in this country. And for whatever stay of execution execution we had on natural health for 2 or 3 or 4 years. It'll all be wiped right back the next time a Democrat's in office, or to reverse back. What he's working on is real substantive change, which is he does need to show the science to the world. He does need to take his time with those that are afraid. He needs the entire nation to recognize they've been lied to, not just the one sitting in this room. And that's going to take time. And that means we have to help with that. We have to help with the messaging. We've got to stay positive on what he's doing. We've got to get into more detail than he can give because he's running a government agency. We take it to the next level. So that's what Maha, CEO of Maha Action right now, and we're building for-profit tools. I've got the Maha podcast for all of you influencers that want to bring truth to power. See Jen right there. Also, if you want to help, if you're a practitioner, we're going to be building a database. I know you already have databases, but we got to get out of our silos. The world is looking at Maha, and I want them looking at you. So we're going to try and open it up so that every one of us is a part of this army. We've got to stay positive. We've got to work together. It's our passion fueling this population to continue the pressure on government, which Bobby Kennedy needs right now. We're all involved. We have fought so long to get here. The miracle is upon us. God is with us, but we've got to do the work now. There's no going to sleep. Here is when we change the world. For this we were born.
Woo! Amen. All right, Brigham. Sorry, hard to go after that.
Yeah, well, to steal from Tulsi Gabbard, when I was working with her about a year ago, I asked her, like, how do you make these changes and how do you drive change? And she looked at me and said, Brigham, the misnomer is that politicians drive policy. Politicians don't drive policy, people drive policy. And we, the people, have a voice, and that voice has risen, and people hear it loud and clear. And I don't think this Maha movement would have ever happened if it wasn't for brave people going out on the limb, like Calley, like yourself, like Dr. Hyman, people going on podcasts, giving the voice to the American people again. And politicians will follow. This is, chronic disease doesn't care if you're Republican or Democrat. It's killing all of us. This is a humanity issue. This is not a partisan issue. Like, we've got to work together. And I think we drive the change, and we continue to push and talk about the issues and challenge the government and give the trade winds to Bobby's sails that he needs to drive home this change.
Hey, and Calley, to kind of bring us home, also love take another minute or two on update. You're in D.C. a lot. You're in the West Wing. You're in conversations. Love just an update. Start with an update on the front lines of what's happening in Washington, and then kind of send us out on an ask.
So how I'd frame what's happening in Washington, the opportunity we have, is that my sister and I have been, literally just through DMs as we started talking about this, members of Congress a couple of years ago, hey, can you come in and can we talk about how to talk, chronic disease? There's a new language for people that Bobby was really putting a stake in the ground for. And 2 years ago, every single meeting I had with members of Congress, they said, oh, of course we want to help children's health, but this isn't a politically resonant issue. They said time after time, phones aren't ringing off the hook. Now the phones are ringing off the hook, and that is why Bobby Kennedy put his hand on the Bible against the most organized opposition that's ever gone against a cabinet secretary in modern American history. It is because Bill Cassidy, who was on the verge of voting no for Bobby Kennedy, said he got more calls and more office visits than he ever had for any issue in his career. I really do think it's because of the Maha moms and all of us. It's extraordinary. I think a lot of people here have probably made a call for the first time. So many people picked up the phone for the first time. I will just tell this to everybody. The grassroots animation, what's happening on X, which does drive the entire debate and narrative, the calls, the visits, the animation that's happening behind this issue is why we are here. And I know many people here are running businesses and doing their own thing. It is vital that we keep the momentum up and stay focused on this issue. Every single win for Bobby is going to be a campaign. Even if it's as simple as signing, a directive, there's going to be so much opposition for that. We need to keep this momentum up. So what and Del and I, and there's a loose coalition around Bobby, we need to learn from him what he's going to be doing. And then we need to organize support for those issues, and wins will beget more wins. When he announces things on food ingredients, when he announces an autism investigation, when he announces NIH reform, when he announces conflict of interest reduction, I honestly, personally don't care what it is when. he is going to announce agenda items, and we need to support that. We need to call. We need to expose when there's opposition the way on Twitter, which actually does matter. So I'm doing whatever I can to help with that. I'll have a newsletter actually where I'll just share the key grassroots actions that I see, trying to help Dell's group however I can. There's this loose coalition. Many people have groups here. We just all need to stay coordinated on what Bobby wants to do and work together to support those wins as much as we possibly can.
Well, it's a little poetic. Calley and his sister's book literally sold more copies last year than the Bible. And but there's something truly spiritual in what's happening. I mean, Dell is basically a pastor up here, but there's really there's spiritual warfare happening. It's unbelievable to see just miracles happen, and how each of you guys live out of your own authentic experience and show up every day fighting for the health of the future of this country and the world. It's super inspiring. Guys, let's give them a round of applause. Thanks, guys.